Right next to New Jersey would be Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I am joined by no, not Corso, but Alex from TikTok, Aelxbomb over on TikTok. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing awesome. I'm super happy to have you here today to talk about D&D. We were just
Yes.
discussing, earlier. Our channel needs more blue hair representation, so thank you for supplying it. Um, so how's your apocalypse going?
All things considered, it's going pretty well, I guess. I'm lucky enough to have not have any of my family members like sick, and also the apocalypse has given time for me to play D&D with my European friends. So one of my players is in America, and then the other four are in the UK. So
Oh, that
that's
makes
fun.
scheduling interesting.
Yeah, we start at noon my time on
Yeah,
Wednesdays and go until 4. And then 4 is late enough for them because they have
yeah,
work the next day.
yeah. That's not too bad. Like when I run our fan game, I usually try and run it in the middle of the afternoon because it's a little more EU friendly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't hit all the continents and time zones and countries, but that seems to be the one that kind of hits the middle the best. So on your TikTok, you do a lot of like GM advice and
Mm-hmm.
and tips and stuff. Um, compared to like a lot of them are kind of more like entertainment. So how did you get started with that?
To be completely honest, uh, I didn't actually, whenever I started making TikToks, I was going to use it as a campaign diary. I was not planning on making TikToks at all. And then people started asking me questions because they saw my campaign diaries, and I was shocked that people saw that. And then I answered questions, and then I was like, well, I've always been told that I have a very unique way of explaining things that a large audience can understand because I break things down in such a nuanced way. And so that's just what I started doing, and now that's just what I do.
Well, and on TikTok, you have to be able to do that, right? Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be able to convey anything or you're going to have like 10 parts to a thought,
Yeah.
because it's in a shorter time frame that's impressive to us because me and Ted can't say anything in less than like 10 minutes. Um, and that's being concise.
Yeah, I feel it's the same for me with a lot of things. I have a book, and I write down all of my thoughts in the book, and then I try to like eliminate as much as I possibly can and just get to like the core. Because the reason why that it works so well with dungeon mastering and game mastering for you to break it down so bare boned is because, I mean, really, game mastering is a skeleton, and you put your own flesh and blood into the skeleton. So if I just provide a skeleton, like with my plot ideas, if I just provide a skeleton, I provide the bare minimum that you need to get started. Hopefully, that makes you start turning your brain to add flesh and bone to it.
So, how did you first get involved with D&D and start playing gaming?
The first time, okay, so the first time I played Dungeons and Dragons was whenever I was in high school, and I still remember this to this day. I played a halfling, and I had a half orc best friend that was played by my friend Noah. And the game fell apart pretty quickly because we were all in high school, and we were also juniors and seniors, so we were all like doing college stuff at the same time. And then whenever, but I still have that set of dice. I still have the red set of dice that my friend Wilson bought me. Um, and then skip forward a couple of years, we try to play. And at that time, I was in a Twitch community with my now boyfriend. And my now boyfriend was like, "Hey, you're playing D&D with them. You want to play D&D with us?" And so that started an actual campaign where Max knew what he was doing because he had been playing since he was 11. And then I just dove headfirst, like into the deep end. Like
Yeah.
it went real far. I was just like, I made my PC Yazgash, and then I realized I love making backstory, and then I realized if I'm the DM, I get to make all of the backstory, and then it just kind of exploded from there. And now I have a Dungeons and Dragons tattoo, and I do this, and it's funny.
I don't I don't actually have any like official D&D tattoos yet. I
Really?
have, yeah, I have, half a dozen tattoos or so, but none of them are actually. I mean, I have a Nerdarchy tattoo. I don't know if that counts, but
Counts. I think that counts.
yeah, when we hit I don't know, when we hit 100,000 subs and we had the Kickstarter and it did well, I was like, all right, I'm getting a tattoo. I
Oh my God,
think,
that's awesome.
even if this were to end today, it's good because I feel like we did something, accomplished something here, and
Well,
I'll be
yeah,
happy with it.
like it's the same with me and my D&D tattoo. Even if like in 10 years I stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons for whatever reason, or in 10 years I stopped playing tabletop RPGs because I don't just play Dungeons and Dragons, but if I stop playing tabletop RPGs, that still serves as a memory for me of a really good time in my life. So, but I highly doubt I will ever stop playing.
So how long have you been GMing now?
I have been GMing for, it's kind of fuzzy, but I've been GMing for either 5 or 6 years, somewhere in that range, because I can't figure out, I don't have any like Facebook post or
Yeah.
Twitter of my very, very first campaign.
Well, I hate to break it to you, Alex. When I first started, those things didn't even exist.
I know. I don't know
So there was
how.
no way of we have no idea how things happened before or when.
Exactly.
No, that's super cool. And the community could always use more GMs for sure. So what other games do you like playing besides D&D?
Well, I believe it's a fourth edition Shadowrun book. And I've always wanted to play Shadowrun, but it has never, the opportunity to run Shadowrun for people has never come up because people are more interested in, I tend to be more interested in sci-fi or fantasy than sci-fi. And the other one that I played, I personally played it several times and I love it. It's Blades in the Dark. It was amazing. It's an amazing game. It's kind of smaller, but I played a bruiser. I played a I played a tough, strong woman, bulky woman with a mohawk who was she basically did what Deadpool did before Deadpool was Deadpool. She would like find people who were stalking people or would find people who owed money and beat the shit out of them and tell them to pay their money. She was like not like a mercenary as in like killer, but a mercenary as in like I'm gonna beat the shit out of you.
I
Oh wait,
like
can I
Breaker.
cuss? Can I
Yeah,
cuss?
it's fine.
Okay, cool. So she and her, you have to have oh, what is it? It's like a guilty pleasure or like a fix or something. And hers was designer handbags.
Oh, nice.
So Blades in the Dark is really fun too.
It's on my list. I have not gotten around to it yet.
I highly recommend it. And then of course I play board games.
What's your favorite board game?
My favorite board game is kind of a small one. It's called Tavern Masters. It is a board game where, you know how you have like deck builders?
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to a deck builder, except your deck is out on the table and it's more like a machine where you're trying to get combos off of other cards that you have in your machine. And the whole point of it is to run a tavern and make the most gold.
I'm more of a casual when it comes to tabletop games, so but I really like Smash Up and Quarriors. They're a lot of fun. I like Smash Up just because it's like stupid easy, and I just like making silly combinations.
Yeah.
And also like if you do aliens anything, it gets really easy to win. Um, and but it's also fun to say things like space unicorns or
Yeah.
whatever.
My favorite casual game, I think it's called Unstoppable Unicorns. Unstoppable. I can't remember the first word.
And then I don't know. Have you tried Quarriors?
I've heard of Quarriors. Quarriors looks really, really fun.
It is.
Yeah. My favorite like casual game is called Unstable Unicorns. It's by the same people that made Exploding Kittens, but
Uh,
it's a little more PvP than Exploding Kittens.
gotcha. Yeah, PvP. Like we've been playing. We've played a lot of Dungeon Mayhem.
Yeah.
On the holidays, we used to, when people gather for holidays, we used to play Munchkin all the time. But I think it's been replaced by Dungeon Mayhem.
I surprisingly have never played Munchkin before.
Yeah, it's fun for a bit, but then it's one of those games that can get monotonous really fast because
Yeah.
it's like you get close to the ending and then everyone piles up on the person that's winning, and then so then it's like starting over again,
Yeah.
pretty much. But yeah, so what kind of games do you like to run? What kind of stories do you like to tell in your games?
I almost exclusively run homebrew. I really want to do Curse of Strahd. I love Curse of Strahd. I really want to do that, but I'm almost exclusively run homebrew. Just because I get to have a lot more creative freedom. Um, to me, it is something that I said in a TikTok at one point that a lot of people resonated with. What the player creates as their backstory to me is just as important as what I create as a story. And so, as if I run a homebrew campaign, I have a lot more freedom of integrating what they think into what I think and like intermixing the two. So that's what I run. And I would say my games are like 70-30 role play fighting.
Yeah, we mostly do homebrew as well. I mean for 5e, just I would say with more recently, I just started playing in this year in a couple of official stuff that other people are running.
Mm-hmm.
The Frozen Sick is the adventure in the Critical Role book, and James and Arcaso, he's the one that wrote it. So we were kind of like I was lucky enough that I actually got to play in that campaign with him running it,
That's
and then
awesome.
yeah, and then we switched from like that whole group. One of the players was like, I really want to play in Curse of Strahd. Will somebody run that? And then DM Jazzy Hands Eugenio on Twitter is like, all right, I'll run it. So like all those characters got sucked up by the mist into Ravenloft. So we're actually playing through that now.
That's so fun.
And I agree with you. Like as far as homebrew versus official, it seems like a lot more work to me to try and take everyone's characters and insert them into an official run adventure, as opposed to like if I just make it up from scratch, I can just include it as I go along
Yeah, exactly.
instead of having to reverse engineer. Uh, so, what is one of the questions you get asked the most?
One of the questions that I get asked the most is probably probably how do you start playing? Like
Yeah,
how do you go about learning Dungeons and Dragons? And of course, my answer, I give the same answer to everyone. There's two components to Dungeons and Dragons. There's role play and then there's numbers. The numbers, there are a lot of people on YouTube who can explain numbers a lot better than I can. Because I'm not a very good, I'm not good at numbers. It's just whenever numbers come out of my mouth, it gets a little confusing. Like in my head, I'm good. And so there's the numbers aspect, and then there's the role play aspect. And the role play aspect, the only way you're gonna do it is if you go do it. Like it's like riding a bike. You just have to get on the bike and start pedaling.
yeah, yeah. Even like games that I don't know the rules so that I'm new to. I don't really like to dive into the mechanics right away. And plus it's like really hard to learn that way anyway. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's just easier to play. But as far as like numbers and stuff, if you came from previous editions, it was like required. Like you couldn't, I mean, in AD&D, there was less of it in there. There was less math and numbers, but they did weird things like let's count backwards, for no apparent
Mm-hmm.
reason. And then in third edition, it was like all kinds of numbers all over the place. So
3.5 was so crunchy.
yeah. that's why I really enjoy fifth edition, because it kind of like streamlined third, but still managed to capture like the things that we really enjoyed and had fun with. Which edition did you start with?
I actually started with 3.5. I in high school and then back in college, whenever I played with my high school friends, and then my first and second game with Max were all in 3.5. Um, and because that was, well, high school was before fifth edition came out. Um,
Yeah.
and then Max hadn't switched to fifth edition at that time. And now we switched to fifth edition. Actually, he switched to fifth edition in my campaign. The first campaign that he played in, that was my campaign. He switched. That's when he switched to fifth edition. That's right.
And I noticed no mention of fourth edition. Um,
Nope.
we've played them all. I mean, we even played 4E for, I don't know, like a year and a half. Our math's a little fuzzy on that one. Um, but then we just started playing other systems for a while, and then well, we came back to D&D. That's pretty much when 5E was launching, and we weren't even aware that they were doing the D&D next and the playtesting. We like stumbled upon it after we had started the channel, and this is easy to remember just because it was like 4th of July weekend of the same year we started Nerdarchy. So it's like, guys, they're doing another thing with D&D. Should we look at this? And it turns out a lot of people wanted us to talk about that.
Yeah.
So we kind of formed the whole channel around that by accident.
It's amazing how much fifth edition has blown up. And it's so shocking to me, the high school students that don't get made fun of because they're playing D&D. Like that wasn't a thing. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't a thing. And so it's I'm happy that fifth edition has blown up. Fifth edition has just gone into the hands of everyone, but it is like interesting and different.
Yeah, I mean it's really cool, and I guess with like Critical Role has really done a lot to help that. It's kind of changed the face of what D&D is, and even Stranger Things, and
Mm-hmm.
um oh crud, what's that show my wife watches? Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
So it's more in the public's eyes now, and it's more like socially acceptable. And you hear these weird stories about kids being like, "Oh, I really want to get into D&D, but I don't think I'm cool enough." And I was like, "Oh, we used to hide the fact that we played."
I know. I actually had someone like at one point ask me through TikTok, like, I want to get into D&D, but I don't feel like I have enough like I don't think I have enough friends, or I don't think, well, I can't remember what they said, but basically they said I don't think I'm cool enough. And I
Yeah,
was like, wait, I'm sorry, what did you just say? Like, you have to be cool to play D&D now? Like,
yeah.
oh.
I'm like, good thing I got in when I did.
Yeah,
So like,
exactly.
I started playing in like probably playing regularly probably in like junior high or going into junior high, and and then into high school, and a lot of my friends were musicians, and we're like on to heavy metal music, wearing leather jackets and denim jackets with the patches and all that
Mhm.
stuff. And we had code words for it, like we called gaming rocking out. So like if we're talking about it in public, people wouldn't really know what we were doing. And then even as a young adult, that's what I started playing even more. And the last thing I wanted people at work to know was what I was doing during the weekends. I was like,
Exactly.
I'd rather have them think I was a bank robber or something, anything but.
I think it hit me. I think it hit me that D&D was acceptable was whenever I was at my previous job and I said that I need Wednesdays off, and my boss was like, "Okay, is there any particular reason why you need Wednesdays off? Do you need the whole day off?" And I was like, "Well, in the morning I have a doctor's appointment, and in the afternoon I have a thing that I need to do, and or I have a preset engagement or something like that." And she like looked at me, and she was so cool. She was so awesome. She was like, "What is it?" And I'm like, Dungeons and Dragons. And I was so ready to have to sit there and explain how taking time off for a game is important to me, and
Yeah.
how taking, asking for this whole day off for a game is reasonable and stuff. I was ready to defend myself to the ninth level. And she literally just goes, okay, yeah, I get it. And I was like, I just literally set my work schedule around the fact that I have D&D and no one cares.
Yeah, yeah. You're geared up for the fight and it never happened.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say, like, after I started Nerdarchy and kind of made it like a career path, it got a lot easier to talk about it because people put more value to something when you're like, you get paid to do that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I get, and they're like, oh, I had this stupid job that I have to go to, so that started really changing things for me personally, and me being more comfortable talking about it. So just like, well, it's nerdy and dorky and whatever, but you're working a soul crushing job.
You're working a soul crush. Yeah. I've actually done paid DMing. I've done paid DMing twice now. Once I was doing a monthly one shot at a local comic or a local game shop for all women, because they wanted to get more women into the tabletop RPG space. So I was doing that. And then at the same game shop, another week or weekend on a month, I would go there and just do a regular game. So it was very helpful to tell my boss, like, this is my casual game. I have other games that I play, because I could tell her for the 2 Saturdays out of the month that I needed off, I could tell her that I had another job. And then for Wednesday, it was like, I'm playing D&D. And then she was like, oh, okay, like whatever. And then I was like, oh, those other jobs are getting paid to play D&D. And she was like, oh, like it like made it more acceptable, because I was like, I'm so good, I'm getting paid, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, as Americans and capitalists, we understand cash.
Yep.
So,
Yep. If you get paid for something, suddenly it becomes valuable.
yeah. So you also stream on Twitch every night.
Yeah, so that kind of started because I was streaming on TikTok, and I was doing stuff. I was doing stuff and people couldn't see my screen, so I kept having to get my tripod
Uh,
and like move it to where they could see my screen, and it looked really ugly. So I was like, why don't I stream on TikTok so that they could see my screen? So I stream every night, almost every night, about 8 p.m. Central. And I normally answer questions. We have conversations about cool, like I'm about to make a TikTok about a mimic house, a dungeon that is a mimic, like the house is a mimic.
yeah.
And the way that the boss fight is, you have to demo the house. It'd be a really fun one shot. We talk about prepping, we talk about fighting, I make maps, just like all DM prep, except I have friends to talk to.
Yeah, I would not be good at that. I would find that very distracting. I wouldn't be able to get anything done.
I mean, it is very distracting, but I kind of like pull it back on task all the time. But I mean, we do get distracted, but that's the fun of it.
Well, I think streamers are way better at multitasking that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we had Will Jones on from Encounter Roleplay, he would be having a conversation with me verbally, and then having a separate conversation in the chat simultaneously. And I'm like, I don't understand that at all. I could maybe type some of the things that I was saying to you, but there's no way I could have two separate streams of consciousness going at the same time. My head would just explode.
I can listen to what you're saying and type to someone in chat at the same time, but I can't talk and type at the same time. I can't do that one.
Yeah. Yeah, like he was doing both, but I'm pretty sure he's an android or an alien or something. So.
Yeah, something like that.
um, so you also do some map making, right?
Yes, I do. I use a program called Incarnate, which is just a wonderful, wonderful program. I'm so glad that I found it. And I actually love making maps. It's really fun. I find it calming and relaxing. So That's what we'll be doing tonight. I have to make a map for the next fight. So,
Yeah. And so how many games are you actually in right now?
unfortunately, I am only in one game right now.
Yeah.
I am hoping to start another game up soon.
Well, I'm sure it won't be too hard. I see a lot of
No.
streams like popping up that are just like all D&D TikTokers.
Yeah, there are a lot of those. Like, what is his name? One Shot. He's one of the big three D&D TikTokers is now able to stream is now able to live off of streaming and
Yeah.
Patreon because he got a stream going of just all TikTokers.
Yeah, it's like I've said it before, but I've become enamored with the TikTok D&D community. Because I mean, there's a lot of great content over there, and it's like a different kind of content than you're going to get on Twitch or YouTube. And it's funny because you go over there, you like let me just get a quick hit of D&D, but then it doesn't work because you watch like 50 TikToks and you did not get your quick. It was not quick at all.
Yeah. What I find very interesting is that there's like, and this is kind of why I fell into like the DM advice area of TikTok, is because I see a lot of like homebrew magic items or homebrew monsters. I see a lot of like story times. I see a lot of like player stuff, but I didn't see a lot of dungeon master, like someone who doesn't mind being the forever DM because it's what they want to do. In fact, like create like I don't ever run into people who are like, I am the forever DM and I am happy to be this way. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm the only one. But
There's definitely some people that I know that are forever DMs, and they're like, I'm also a terrible player, so I'd rather DM because they're always like, uh, you know, uh, armchair quarterbacking, when they're playing,
that's
and they're
funny.
and they're and they're conscious of it, so they know like they just need to DM.
Yeah. I'm actually a forever DM because uh because I need to be doing a lot of stuff at once. Like I need to have a lot of streams of conscious happening at the same time. And as a DM, I have a lot of streams of conscious happening at the same time, but as a player, I have one.
Yeah.
And so also, it's always fun to create plot lines, it's always fun to do story, and it's always fun to fake out your players.
What's an ideal table size for you?
Five, I think, five or
That's a good number.
six.
Yeah.
Um, Four, because okay, so if you have three or four, if one player miss, it's a big deal, and
Yeah.
you can't play without that one player, and then nobody has fun. But it's a big deal at three or four for one player to miss because it's 1/4 or 1/3 of the entire party, and that could completely shift the dynamic of like a fight or like for example, we were going to play last week, but our bard was moving, and our bard is the one that does all of the talking, all the schmoozing, like that's his thing. Or this was 2 weeks ago. He does all the talking, but because he was missing, the next section was talking, and so he needed to be there to schmooze people. And he so we had to not. But whenever you have like five or six, if one person misses, there's someone else to pick up that slack.
Yeah, so I ran this game called the Scarlet Sisterhood on our channel. I think there's like 63 episodes. But I mean they're like 2-hour episodes, so they're not like it's not super long.
Mm-hmm.
Um and like I had put that game together because my gaming experience has always been a bunch of guys playing D&D. So, I reached out to see if I could find some women that I could run a game for. And and I think like originally like we found I had like 4 players, and then for like a 2-hour game too, like 4 players is like the optimal number. Anything more than that, you don't have enough time for everyone to kind of get in there and do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then like, we'd have players that were, one player dropped off right away. So we were like down to 3 players and ran for that for a while. We had inconsistent players. So there in that stream, there is a bunch of games where I run for like 2 players,
Yeah,
and
and
we just tell different
that's a
stories.
problem. Yeah, but it just it doesn't work like that. So I find that with 5 or 6 players, there is enough overlap between, like, oh, maybe our mouth is gone, but we
Mm,
have a paladin. So, like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like, that kind of a thing happens.
yeah. Like
Um,
with that game, we kind of finally leveled off with like a solid 3 players,
oh, good.
and and that works okay. Like I've always been of the opinion you can play with any number of players. Like a lot of solo plays being getting introduced and talked about a lot more recently. Um, it's just that you can't run the same stories that you would, like you said, with with a 4 to 6 player party. The less players you have, it becomes different. And also, it doesn't make sense to run those kind of stories either, right? If you only have 2 players, what does happen is though you can play like games that are more maybe like TV shows or novels that you've read where you have that
Yeah.
dynamic.
Yeah.
Um, and I've had a lot of fun with that in the past.
I've actually played one-on-one D&D. My boyfriend Max, whenever we were in between games, we played one-on-one D&D, and it was actually very, very fun. It was a little stressful for me because the balancing was like insane, but it was quite fun because we were able to like really, really dive like a book in
Yeah.
depth with what was going on with him and really like focus on his player, on his character, and that was a lot of fun. But I don't know if I'd run D&D if it was just 2 people.
Um, you never know until you try it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
so there's a game out now, Ironsworn, that is like you can run it DM-less and
Yeah.
like almost like I guess choose your own path with one person or more, or you can have like a traditional GM. So it's kind of interesting to see these new things coming out, and some of the other stuff that Wizards of the Coast had released more recently was the idea of solo play, and that was like I guess the whole idea behind their sidekicks
Mm-hmm.
for the game.
So I found the sidekicks thing. That was Unearthed Arcana, correct? Or is that Natasha's Cauldron?
I think it's going to be in Tasha's. There was an Unearthed Arcana, and I think it was in the D&D Essentials that they also released it, like the whatever that box set. There was rules for it.
Uh, so Matt Colville had a Kickstarter for this thing called Strongholds and Followers, and I supported it. I have the book with me. I love it. It's a really great book. It's really helpful information, and I love incorporating strongholds and then giving other people custom magic items and stuff like that. But one of the things that there's in there is followers, which is very similar to sidekicks. Um, so I loved the followers, and I did end up giving one of my players in an old game a follower, and it worked phenomenally. So I'm very excited for the sidekick stuff.
Yeah, the it's an interesting book to bring back in because in AD&D at a certain level everybody got followers. It was like it used to be baked into the game, and I guess
Yeah.
the idea was like you would move to the next stage where you're more like kingdom building
Hmm.
than adventuring. So it's kind of cool to see those like old ideas get baked back into it. So in the chat, Joe wants to know: do you have a favorite dragon?
Ooh, so this is a very fun fact about my homebrew setting called the Wayward Arrow. Um, there are no dragons. The dragons in Slinever, humans, halflings, gnomes, and elves were introduced into the world. The dragons actually enslaved them and made them slaves. And then the metallic dragons did nothing. They just sat by, and the chromatic dragons took over. And then they decided that they wanted to become gods. Slaves weren't good enough. So they hatched a plan, and the gods were like, we can see you hatching this plan, stop, like, what are you doing? And then they tried to climb the holy mountain, Mount Tankian. If you know what that reference is, you're awesome. uh and they climbed the holy mountain to try to get into the celestial plane. And so the gods punished them by turning them into the thing that they hated the most, mortals. And that is where the Dragonborn are. The Dragonborn are the punishment of the dragons trying to kill the gods. And that's how the Dragonborns came to be. But I think probably my favorite dragon is probably a green dragon, because they're very, very cunning, and that's always fun.
And poison. Let's not forget poison.
Yeah, poison.
Yeah, I'm fond of the green as well. Also, I like the fin aesthetically. I like the way that looks as well. We actually did something similar with our world too, where we removed the dragons.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So like we had like we did a thing like most people do. We have different ages, and every time something happened and the gods didn't like it, they would just sweep it into an extra dimensional plane or space, like a closet, or under the rug.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then, so now it's like, so then we have this concept like going in where some of these things are starting to find their way back into the world. And, which may or may not cause the world to break as these barriers become thinner and thinner, which we've been playing with, more recently. Mm-hmm. And so we still like kind of want to have dragons in our world. So we always have to come up with like interesting ways to do it. Like I ran a campaign, probably for like 4 or 5 years, and there was a couple Dragonborn, but we started off not having Dragonborn in the world, with dragons. So like the two that were in the game fell through a portal, and then that portal stayed open and was connected to this realm where that was basically ruled by a dragon, and it was an empire of Dragonborn. So they kind of got to like navigate and become ambassadors between the two worlds, and establish the relationship there. And then we kind of had whole plots kind of like came from that, because there was a faction of the Dragonborns that were basically Dragonborn supremacists, and which turned into like these like terrorists. So it just gave something for the players to kind of latch onto, and actually the ones that latched onto it the strongest were actually the Dragonborn. They're like this famous general in from their kingdom was like the leader of this faction. So they took it super personally.
So that's funny that you talk about bringing it back in, because I originally had absolutely no dragons at all, and then I was like, okay, so how would I like, not being able to fight a dragon would suck. So I started slowly incorporating dragons back in. And one of the ways that I incorporated dragons back in is this man. This is Thargudith. He is a demon lord, but he takes the form of a dragon. And his stats are one of an ancient red dragon. But that's one way. But the other way is that the Shadowfell, there was one single dragon that was banished to the Shadowfell whenever he was like younger. And whenever all the dragons turned into Dragonborn, they didn't change him. So the entirety of the Shadowfell is ruled by this one dragon. And that's like, how I put dragons back in.
And that's like the fun part, right? To make this rule and then find the exceptions, so that you can still have it. And also, like, the weirdness with dragons is, like, when the players encounter a dragon, I want it to be, like, super special. So I try not to use dragons so much, because
exactly,
it's weird to me where it's like they're just killing dragons all over the place and it's just another monster.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I totally agree that, like, there's something about, I mean, it's in the name of the game. There's something about dragons that are very, like, special, which is why like they wanted to become gods in my mind, is because they are very much like gods or keepers of Dungeons and Dragons. So I put the shadow dragon in the Shadowfell, so that eventually the players, if in some capacity or in one of my games, will be like, oh, there's this really evil dragon, and he's trying to come over to the material plane. We got to go kill him. And that's kind of like the reason why he's there, is because now this dragon becomes special because you're going to kill the last dragon.
So, what is your favorite monster to use as a dungeon master?
The um the Hellfire engine from I believe it's Xanathar's Guide to Everything. The Hellfire engine. It's a construct, CR11, I believe. And my favorite thing about it is that it has a feature called Flesh Crushing Stride.
Yeah.
It's like a tank that breathes fire. It's amazing. That's one of my favorite. That's my all-time favorite monster. But probably my favorite monster to like actually pin against, because that's like a one-time deal thing. Hellfire engines are like a one-time deal thing. But
You can't just use them all over the place.
no, absolutely not. I would honestly say, what are my favorite to pin against people? Probably the Yuan-Ti. Right now, my players in my current campaign they killed the Viscount by accident, but because they forgot fire damage doesn't knock out you can't do non-lethal fire damage, so they killed the Viscount.
Oops.
But it turned out the Viscount was working with the big bad King Cobra. So the magistrate found the players guilty of killing the Viscount, and their punishment, instead of going to jail or being sentenced to death, they have to bring him King Cobra's head. And that's how I got them into Arc 2. And so I've just really researched the Yuan-Ti, and the Yuan-Ti have so many levels of CR, so many different abilities. There's fighters, there's magic casters, there's healers. It's really just the Yuan-Ti are very, very round and robust. And that's probably my favorite like classification to put against, because it's just so robust.
So I pulled up the Hellfire engine real quick.
Oh my god, it's so fun! Please,
it is. It is. One of their headers is many forms, one purpose. Fire engines take many forms, but all of them have one purpose: to mow down foes in waves. I can see why you would love that monster.
It's a tank construct that spits fire and literally runs over people.
Yeah,
it's great fun.
It's a blast. Whenever you can mow down your enemies. There used to be the similar thing used to be another construct. I guess in third edition, maybe even AD&D, the Juggernaut.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people compare it to.
Yeah, except for this Juggernaut has acid spraying and thunder cannons. So
that's crazy.
It is crazy. The campaign you're currently running, how many players is in that?
I have so it's kind of complicated. I have 5 players right now. I have 4. Wait, there's Max, and then there's Clayton, and then there's Jack, and then there's so I have 4 players right now, but I'm going to have a 5th player eventually, because the person who is deciding what King Cobra, I gave King Cobra to somebody else because I wanted them to experience what it was like to actually like make decisions for a character, because he was always too nervous to play. So I wanted him to understand like what it's like. So I gave him King Cobra, and he's the one that decides what King Cobra does. Also because Max is really good at guessing what I'm going to do, because he's known me for so long. And so once King Cobra is dead, Iron will be joining our group. So I technically have 5 players.
How long has that campaign been going on?
God, like a month or 2. Not that long.
Fairly new.
Yeah, I had a year-long campaign, and then I did a Twitch show, and then I had an 8-month-long campaign, and then that fell through. So now I have this campaign. So it's really hard to keep campaigns going.
Yeah, I find that's a pretty common problem with DMs have. I get for us. I think one of the things that's really helped us recently is setting a session limit. Like we're gonna play this game for 12 sessions, 6 sessions, whatever.
Hmm.
I think that helps as players and the GM because you're committing to a specific number. Um, and that's what we've been doing. And the thing is, it's like if you get to the end and you're like you still want to keep going, you can
Yeah.
always just re-up the commitment with everybody and kind of do a new session 0. Even if you're still in the same campaign, to kind of check in with everybody, see where they're at,
Hmm.
and then people can voice whether or not they want to do that or not. Like we did that going from one campaign to the other, and like half the group kept their characters and half the group wanted new characters.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, that's worked for us, and we've always had that problem of like so many dead campaigns that fell to the wayside.
Yeah, I'm quite frustrated because, well, I mean, I was a little bit frustrated because our year-long campaign was really, really looking good. All of the players were really enjoying it. Everyone was having fun, and I stopped that campaign specifically to do the show on Twitch. And then because it was the same exact time slot, it was the only time slot that would work. And then that show fell through, and then I tried to get the campaign back together, and people
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And I was like, "Wait, I want to play for longer than a year."
Yeah, I mean, we finally managed it after me and Ted have been in the same group for like it's over 20 years now,
That's awesome.
and it literally took like almost that long for us to finally get into start games that we actually finish and stick with. When 5e started, we started 2 groups, and we took both of them to level 20. From first level, which is something we've never been able to do before. My buddy Mark would always joke, he'd be like, if you want to play a 15th level character, you better start at 13.
Yeah.
Because that's like how long our games would last. Uh,
No, the group that I have right now is very, very, very committed. They're very good. They're very good. The thing that's different about this group that I've never had, and this is something that I recommend if you want to get a long-standing group. The thing that is different about this group than any other group is the fact that this group is all veteran players. All of these people are experienced. All of
uh,
these people have played D&D before. All of these people are committed to it and have agreed upon the fact that like this is a commitment. And so that's what I think will make this campaign like last.
yeah, and you kind of have to go in with that mentality. That's why session zeros and social contracts are so important in the beginning of the game, just to get everybody on the same page with it. So, question from the chat, P. Ribbon, did you get any initial pushback from the community as a DM for being female? And what advice would you give young ladies who wish to DM but are intimidated?
The first time I ever dungeon mastered at a game shop, I walked into the game shop and I had my backpack on and I was carrying my laptop. I was carrying my binder with all of my stuff in it. It was a female running the game, running Dungeons and Dragons. You really are a unicorn. And I was like, what? I'm so confused. And so I did have
Uh,
pushback. I did have pushback definitely whenever I started running. One of the best things that I can tell you to do, if you are someone who is not a white male, if you are any sort of different, um, make sure that you are confident in yourself, because as soon as they see your confidence, they will take you seriously. Because like the thing that I did wrong was that I was like, yeah, that's me, hi, and like I wasn't confident in myself. I wasn't calling myself amazing and great and stuff like that, and I wasn't asserting myself, and that made them think that I wasn't going to be good. And so they actually stuck me with all the problem players. They put all the problem players at my table. I ended that game. I went to the car and I cried because there was a guy who was playing Candy Crush the entire time
Uh,
and was just killing everyone. And at the end of the game, he stood up, turned off his phone, looked at me, and said, "You probably shouldn't DM. I'm going to DM next week," and walked off.
ugh, that's horrible. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Well, I'm glad that I went through it because
Uh,
I said no, that's not how I'm going to be treated. Like I don't deserve to be treated like that. So the next time I went into a game shop, I got the same response kind of from guys. They were like, "Oh, you're Alex?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm Alex, and I'm here to DM because that's what I love to do." And as soon as I exuded confidence, as soon as I was like asserted myself and was like, "I'm here. I'm can DM just as good as everyone else," they completely dropped it. They didn't care at all. And then I held that game for like 6 months at that card shop. So
so
that's my advice.
confidence.
Just like believe in yourself. Just
Uh,
don't allow somebody else to pick your emotions for you. If somebody decides something about you, that doesn't mean it's true. They've just decided it. So keep your truths in your heart and keep your truths that you are a dungeon master and that you are valid and you are good inside you and exude that.
so did you start DMing publicly like that as opposed to like with a group of your friends?
Actually, the way that my very first campaign was with a bunch of people on Reddit. And
Okay.
let me tell you, that fell apart really fast.
Yeah.
And so then I tried again and that fell apart too. And then I went to and then I went to a game shop thinking that I would find real life people. And then that was my experience.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is about an hour away, there was a game shop and it was a game bar. Actually, it wasn't a game shop. It was a bar that had board games and stuff. And I asked them if they had players looking, and they said yes, they did. And so I got a group together of people that they had vetted, that they had fill out these questionnaires, and then I got to pick my players. And then we met up, and I asserted myself, and no one questioned it. So,
Sounds like the process might have been a little bit better as well. Where where they where you said like at the one they just stuck you with all the problem,
yeah.
the problem players, which also wouldn't be great for someone if they weren't a good DM, right? They wouldn't be able to handle that. They wouldn't know what to do. They probably get overwhelmed really quickly.
I literally just put out a TikTok that was like, "Hey, I want to remind DMs of something," and I was like, "Your fun matters just as much as everybody else's fun." And so some people were commenting like, "My players like always do this and they never listen and all that," and I would just literally comment back like, "It's time to find new players then, because that you don't deserve that."
Yeah, everyone at the table is a player. I mean, it's, the GM and the characters just have different roles, and and everyone's fun is equally valid, right? And
Exactly.
that's why it's really important as a GM to kind of pitch the game you want to play, the game you want to run, and oftentimes we'll talk about on our channel that the DM can do whatever they want with the game, but there's some caveats to that. Like if you do shitty things, you'll end up not having players anymore.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, you should, as long as you're upfront with this is how I want to run the game, this is how I'm doing things, I'm including this, I'm excluding that. It's totally valid as a GM. You can do that with the game. Now we also recommend that you get, players to add and include them in those plans, because you're going to get more player buy-in and your games will be better and last longer. But the GM is a player and as well, and if they want to run a specific game or use certain rules or change things, they absolutely can. But let the players know what's going on so they're not surprised. It's not if you're doing something different than what the core rules are.
I think that player agency is very, very important. and that players being able to, like, that's the reason why I modify some stuff. Like, I modify traps that if you don't see the trap or you fail the saving throw, you have one reaction to do something to try to lessen the damage of the trap. So like duck or jump, but you don't know where the trap is coming from yet.
Uh-huh.
So you're guessing. That puts the agency back in the player's hands, and then they don't feel cheated because they didn't check for magical traps, like there's always that stuff. But I like you said, I have always been that person that, like, I'm very upfront with the players. And I've told people, like, hey, I just want to let you know up front, my games tend to run 70-30 role play fighting. And I've had people say, oh no, thank you. And I'm totally fine with that. Like, please, if that doesn't sound like fun to you, if you want to punch things in the face, like, go find, like, that's not my table, but I want you to have fun anyways. It's so funny. Okay, so this is kind of silly, but Tupac has a quote, which is, I I want you to have dinner, just not at my table.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I feel. Like, I want you to eat, just not at my table.
That's a great quote. I like that. Because, like, our games, like, we're lucky. We rarely do more than one combat a session, right?
Yeah, same here.
Sometimes there isn't one. And it also greatly changes play, right? Because if your players know you generally are going to do one combat a session, when it does happen, they're going to go nuclear, right?
Yeah.
And as a GM, it kind of changes what you can put in there. But also from the player standpoint, if you do then have a session where you put in 2 counters, they get confused, and they've also used a lot of their resources. If you do 3, forget about it. They're totally out of their element, But it's a different type of game.
So I had my players playing a gauntlet, and they were locked in a basement. There was a secret basement it was supposed to be the Church of Bolthar, which is a certain god, but actually his arch nemesis Joom built this as a fake church so that they could have worship of her. So she had a gauntlet underneath it. And so they were going through the gauntlet, and they had just done a combat. They had gone to a puzzle, and then they did a combat, and they're like, okay, we need to take a rest. And I have a specific music player, so I can broadcast the music that I'm playing to everyone. And literally they go to take a long rest, and they're like, all right, let me roll my hit die. And in the music player, I do a really, really tinny, disgusting sounding violin. And I'm like, this is what you begin to hear, and you don't believe you'll be able to sleep while this is playing. And they all just looked at me, and I was like, you can't rest. And they were like, can we short rest? And I was like, no, you can't short rest. And they were so mad at me. But it was funny.
Yeah, we call that the 5-minute adventuring day.
I love it. But I mean, like, the thing is that I specifically designed the gauntlet for them to not take a rest. But it was just what you're saying. Like, if you do one combat a session, and then all of a sudden you throw in 2 combats, they're like, I'm sorry, what did you just do?
Yeah.
And I threw in 4 on no rest. But it was designed for them not to rest. You know what I'm saying? So, like, they did it, but they just weren't happy about it.
So Gudar wants to know if you've had any TPKs.
I have not had any TPKs because for the majority of my DMing career, I pulled punches. And I don't recommend anyone pulling punches. If somebody's going to die, kill them. It's fine. Trust me, they have about 10 more characters saved up in their brain ready to play. But I've not had TPK. I almost had a TPK whenever we were fighting demons. But then my archer, the ranger, rolled a crit and killed the demon by stabbing it in the eye, and he was the only one left alive. And then he was able to go over and stabilize everyone else.
Yeah, we've had a few TPKs, but none recently. We haven't even had that many deaths. I've killed a couple fans in some fan games.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were like towards the end. Like we did, we went to like a local con and we ran into a couple fans, and it was like close to Ted's house. So Of course, we did the responsible thing and brought some strangers back to Ted's house for D&D.
Of
But
course.
generally, if we run into enough fans, our thing is we'll run a game.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Halloween weekend, so I did like a haunted carriage thing, that they had to kind of like solve the mystery of why are people getting murdered. And then at the end, they finally figure out it's this haunted carriage that is like it's been possessed of the ghosts of this love triangle between this mistress and wife and husband. Well, when they defeated it, it exploded and it killed like Ted's character and the one of the other players. And then I had another player running through one of our ventures called Maze of Mandoon. And at the end, there's a pit trap full of flying snakes, and they tripped it. And I was like, all right, well, you begin to fall, and as you do, a cloud of snakes kind of bursts up from beneath you, and like X amount of snakes bit them. And I'm like, this is how much damage you took. And they're like, oh, I'm dead. I'm like, oh, you're down? And he's like, no, I'm just dead.
Were you a wizard?
I don't remember, but it was like at the very end of the adventure. Like that was like
Jesus.
the last encounter. So it was okay. And it's a one shot. Characters die in one shots. Yeah. But like early on, my buddy Mark again, his character got killed. And it was like our first or second session that Ted was running for 5e. And he's like we didn't even have all the books yet. It was just the player's handbook. And he made imps out of like another monster because we didn't have stats for imps yet, and like orcs. And he's like, it's just 4 orcs and these imps, they'll be fine. And that's when we learned about why you should not leave home without a medicine kit or a healer's kit. Because one of the players went down, failed their first death save. One of the other players tried to stabilize them, failed the medicine check, and then they rolled a 1. And they're just dead.
Oof.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had like characters die. I've had characters die at my table, but they were all like in short games, like games that didn't last very long. In my game that lasted a year, that's where the TPK almost happened, because if all of them had been knocked unconscious, the demons would have killed them. Like they would not have taken them hostage. They would have killed them. And so that's like the closest I've ever come to a TPK. But I think that I've had like 3 characters die, but I had a really, really bad habit of pulling punches because I was like, oh no, I don't want their character to die. And it wasn't until like Max sat me down and was like, okay, listen, every single player has at least 10 things they want to play. So if you want to kill someone, you can kill someone. And I was like, okay.
So, and then there's those stakes as well. It's like part of the game. Also, like the way games are played now and players are now is a lot different than when we kind of first started, where it was like, GMs were a lot more adversarial, and you probably were going to, lose characters. It was just part of the game back then.
Yeah.
But that's fine as well. We are just past the hour mark, actually 5 past. So no, there's nothing to be sorry about. I'm enjoying the conversation.
I am too.
So it is that time to head on out. Final thoughts before we do?
Thank you guys can I shout myself out?
Yes, you can. Links are in the description.
Thank you guys so much for watching and sitting here and listening to us talk. I make TikToks for mostly for DMs, sometimes funny ones, but mostly for DMs to improve what they have already built by themselves. So if you want to check out that's cool. And then also I stream on Twitch almost every single day at 8 p.m. Central. And we mostly goof off and come up with really cool things like an ugly sentient hat that whenever you become friends with it gives you telekinesis. Yeah, we come up with stuff like that. So if you want to check that out, that would be really awesome. And tell me you're from this stream, because that would be fun. Okay, that's all.
Thanks a lot. And until next time, everybody, stay nerdy.